Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP, Ukraine War Frontline update for the 4th of January 2024. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key on the video at the moment, pause the video. If not, we can continue. Now, I'm not going to refer to the ISW today, a little bit behind the time, but and thank you very much to JR who's done the mapping. The northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatovo to Crimea shows no activity, or at least no territorial exchange until we get down to here at the Terny, Torska, Zarichna, Yampolivka salient that is west of Crimea. Now, Andrew Perpetua, there are no changes to Andrew Perpetua's map, but there are quite a few changes to the grey zone, so there is movement on the front line. It just hasn't affected the Russian defensive line at the moment, so they haven't moved it considerably forward or backward in any area, though the grey zone might have moved somewhat. Right, this is quite a large area of land. They are within 4 kilometers of the Luhansk border. They've moved about 3.5 kilometers further to the west here. It's a fairly significant move if it is true. Russian army continue increasing the salient towards Terny by advancing 4 kilometers from the border with Luhansk Oblast. That is fairly worrying, concerning for the Ukrainians to some degree. Is more concerning if they get to the Zherebets River and over the river. This area between the Zherebets River and the highway that comes north to south here, I think isn't that important. It acts as a buffer zone, and obviously, you know, the more land they take, the more momentum they get, and maybe, you know, it puts the Ukrainians under pressure, but not too worried about that. However, they get to here, and the Ukrainians might want to be a little bit more concerned. That's quite a large move for the Russians, in the Serebryantski forest area as well, as according to Suret maps again. So their previous one noted here. They don't have a tweet to go alongside with the claim of the Serebryantski forest, but it's quite a large area. They previously had it mapped that the Russians had a sort of small bridgehead, or whatever you might call it, coming down here into the south, southwards into the forest, and this whole pocket here was sort of grey zone. Now that whole pocket is under Russian controllers, according to them. So there's a fair amount of land there for the Russians to have gained, equating to about 1.5 kilometers in depth. Again, a bit of a worry. It doesn't really change the outcome too much, but of course, if the Russians keep taking territories in a number of areas, it will affect morale. It will give a bit of grist to the mill, to the propaganda mill back in Russia. So, yeah, how much do the Ukrainians want to hold on to certain bits of land against how much do they want to look after the lives of their troops? But there's also the issue they have of not a lot of artillery ammunition. That's a real concern for them. One artillery unit said they're having to retreat because they're literally down to 10% of what they're firing, 10 to 20% of what they were firing 6 months ago. So artillery ammunition is a real concern. Right, as we come down to Bakhmut, you can see that there aren't any changes to the Bakhmut front line, which is in line with kind of what we've been saying over the last few days, last week or so. We haven't seen too much change here. Bit of a culmination of the Russians potentially, although they did make a few gains yesterday, as according to a few of the mappers. So, yeah, the important area is, I think, this Bodanivka area, which the Ukrainians really want to defend. They don't want to let the Russians any further to the west, because that puts them in reach of Chasiv Yar, and they need a bit of a buffer. They need to defend Chasiv Yar. So I'd imagine the Ukrainians will be defending that quite strongly. Further to the south, I don't think it's as important, but that seems to have ground somewhat to a halt over the last few days as well. And then we come down to Avdiivka, where we can see some gains for the Russians in that northern area by Stepova, not in Stepova again, but to the north of it, along the railway line. Some small gains here for the Russians, basically a triangle, that triangle there, and a little bit of this field as well, just at the bottom there. So not huge changes, but it is somewhere that they incrementally advance daily at the moment, the Russians, but they have been stopped around Stepova. We'll see how that goes. And no changes to the rest of the cauldron around Avdiivka there. Surat map says of that northern part, advances west of the railway, 1.5 kilometers northeast of Berdichi. In addition, troops made new advances in the northern Dachas. Oh, I've missed that one, of Avdiivka. So actually, there might be some changes to the mapping. Let's have a little look. Yeah. So the other side of that river, just I think equalizing. Yeah, it's just equalizing that area. So it's literally that area there. So sorry, I missed that one. Note to self. This is what happened. So GIR did the mapping, but there's just been an update of Surat maps. So I've put that through, which he didn't. He had mapped before that, so it is completely on me that I've missed that one. Nonetheless, not really going to change the story of the world. That tiny change. And Avdiivka is broadly stable at the moment, although I'm sure there's very tough fighting going on. Now, Deep State Map has a bit of a game for the Russians in this Pervomaisky-Pisky area between those two. Surat map says of this area, the situation northwest of Donetsk city, the Russian army have advanced from the northern shore of Izmailivsky Pond and are trying to separate Ukrainian forces of the southern Dachas from the rest of the town of Pervomaisky. As a result, some troops began to withdraw from this area. So the claim is that from Surat map, so this is not a Deep State Map claim, but Deep State Map does indicate the Russians have taken some land here. The Surat map saying, well, actually, the Ukrainians are putting up some resistance there, but they're withdrawing from the main sort of built up area just to the southeast here. So we'll see what takes place there. Right, now we'll move further to the south. And as you can see, not too much to report on for the rest of the mapping, apart from a little bit in Mariinka here, where Deep State Map is sort of catching up to Surat maps in showing that the Russians have made some small advances to the south of that water feature going towards Herivka. We saw this morning that Kurakove, which should be to the... Where are we? Oh, here it is. To the west of Mariinka was hit quite heavily last night with shelling. All of these areas around here get a regular pasting from Russian artillery, a lot of munition attention. But yeah, so a little bit of a move there. No changes to Novomykhailivka, though we did see the use of an MTLB that was filled with munitions, including FAB 500 bombs, I think, or similar. And that was, although I doubt it's a guide, they're not going to waste the guided glide kit. It's so difficult to say. And they're not going to waste that by putting it inside an MTLB and shoving it into the middle of the fields. But the initial bomb has been loaded in, and there's a massive explosion somewhere around Novomykhailivka where the Russians were trying to clear the minefields. I don't know how successful that was, whether that's a good use of equipment and an awful lot of munitions. Nonetheless, a big explosion somewhere around Novomykhailivka. Right, then we come further to the south, or really to the west and then south, past Velika Novosilka, and we come to Robotyne, where there's not too much to report, which is good news. I saw some footage just now of the Ukrainians using some kind of cluster airburst munition from a drone, dropping, I presume, a drone dropped IED. So that was interesting in and of itself. I've not seen that before. But also there were two T-90 tanks, Russian tanks, that had not been seen before. So there's a couple of Russian losses around there that have not previously, as far as I'm aware, been counted. Anyway, nothing really to report about Robotyne. And then we come down to Krinky, where it seems to be pretty much the same situation there as we've seen recently. There is a piece from War Translated. Dmitry Sladkov, who's one of these Russian military bloggers, talks about the difficult situation for the Russians in the Dnipro shores. Ukrainian concentrated a powerful electronic war and drone group there. So this is what he says, Kherson direction. Drones of the Ukrainian armed forces operate aggressively and en masse. It is difficult and dangerous for us to move in the frontline air and rear areas because the enemy attacks our vehicles, guns and infantry groups using FPV and comfortably directs artillery at our roads and positions. And at night, heavy drones mine our paths and roads, hindering the movements of our troops. The same situation is not only in Krinky, but also in Eleshki and Kokovka. We are ready to confront the Ukrainian armed forces in the air in a range of enemy drones, but we are hampered by the massive use of electronic warfare and electronic warfare equipment by them. That is, there was such a situation. The enemy was trapped in the bridgeheads on our shore. We hid his people and did not allow help, ammunition and provisions to be brought to the bridgeheads across the Dnipro. But the Ukrainian armed forces took countermeasures. They concentrated a large group of electronic warfare and UAVs in the Kherson direction, thereby pinning down our drones, reconnaissance drones and artillery spotting drones. All we have to do is accept the challenge and create our own group of drones and electronic warfare in the Kherson direction. That is, in our history there, with naval battles between Peter and so on and so forth, starts going into stuff that's not worth reading really. But interesting that the Ukrainians are operating some effective drone and electronic warfare equipment in the area and do have dominance in that particular part of the battlefield. Yeah, not a huge amount of difference to the front lines in the main, or at least in some of the areas we're used to seeing. However, some fairly substantial changes in the Crimea area if Surat Maps is being accurate in their claims there. So, yeah. One to watch out for over the next few days, I guess. Right, thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. You guys are legends. Take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.